The congressional hearing room is packed, cameras positioned at every angle, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, sits tall in her navy blue blazer, adjusting her microphone with the poise of someone used to being in the spotlight. For years, Bondi has thrived in high-stakes political battles, her polished image symbolizing authority and control. But today, there's something different, a flicker of unease beneath her confident exterior. Across from her sits Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett of Texas, her posture steady, a folder clutched tightly in her hand. Crockett's lips curve into the faintest smile, the kind that suggests certainty, not arrogance, but the calm of someone holding cards that no one else realizes are in play. Only moments earlier, Bondi had been lecturing the committee about government transparency. Her words were bold and carefully rehearsed. The American people deserve the truth about where their tax dollars go. Delivered with authority, her statement echoed through the chamber, drawing nods from allies and stern looks from opponents. But as Crockett rises, the energy in the room shifts. The Texas Congresswoman fixes her eyes on Bondi and doesn't look away. Without breaking that gaze, she opens the folder in her hands, slowly, deliberately. A silence spreads through the room, the kind that announces a storm before the thunder strikes. Then Crockett speaks. Her voice is firm, precise, and cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Before you lecture us about transparency, Ms. Bondi, I'd like to ask about the $500 million contract your private consulting firm received through a shell company last year." The words hang in the air like an explosion. For a moment, the entire room freezes. Bondi's face drains of color, her composure slipping. Her hand reaches toward the water glass in front of her but stops halfway, trembling slightly. This isn't just a question. This is a grenade lobbed directly into the carefully constructed fortress of her public image. Crockett doesn't flinch. She lifts the stack of papers from her folder, raising them high enough for the entire committee to see. "I have documents here that link your firm, Bondi Strategies, to offshore accounts that received federal funds through 3 separate shell companies." Bondi opens her mouth, but nothing comes out. The committee chairman leans forward, eyebrows arching in disbelief. Journalists in the back row scramble to capture every word, their fingers flying across keyboards, phones buzzing as headlines begin forming in real time. Nobody expected this. Not the audience, not the press, and least of all, Pam Bondi herself. This isn't political theater anymore. This is the moment Jasmine Crockett has chosen to unveil a $500 million secret that Bondi never wanted exposed. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Pam Bondi, polished, practiced, a symbol of establishment politics. She arrived that morning, with her signature blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer suit immaculate. As Florida's first female attorney general, she had spent years building a national reputation as a corruption fighter, then parlayed that reputation into a lucrative consulting empire in Washington. Her firm, Bondi Strategies, quickly became the insider's insider. The group corporations called when they needed someone who knew how to navigate the system. But behind the polished image lurked something darker. Offshore accounts, shell companies, and according to Crockett's investigation, a massive government contract that made Bondi one of the wealthiest political consultants in America. She embodies the revolving door problem in Washington, one former colleague whispered to reporters. She prosecuted corruption in office, then cashed in on the same system she once claimed to fight. On the other side stands Jasmine Crockett, a rising Democratic star, a former civil rights attorney, and a congresswoman who has built her reputation on challenging power, not protecting it. Where Bondi is deliberate and cautious, Crockett is bold and direct. Where Bondi thrives, in backroom deals, Crockett has spent her career fighting in open courtrooms. Her staff has been quietly investigating government contracts for months, tracing paper trails, interviewing whistleblowers, and connecting dots others overlooked. Every path led back to Pam Bondi. Now, in this charged moment, Crockett is ready to reveal what she has uncovered. She steps closer to the projector, sliding a document onto the glass. On the large screen behind her appears a corporate registration form. "Ms. Bondi," Crockett says evenly, "please confirm for the record, you are the sole owner of Bondi Strategies LLC?" Bondi leans forward. "Yes, I am," she replies, a trace of irritation in her voice. "And would you also confirm that Bondi Strategies has no parent company or ownership stakes held by other entities?" Crockett presses. Bondi hesitates, just for a moment. "That's correct." Crockett nods, then taps the document on the screen. "Then perhaps you can explain why Coastal Consulting Group, registered in Delaware, lists Bondi Strategies as a wholly owned subsidiary." Gasps ripple through the room. Bondi's attorney leans in quickly, whispering into her ear. Bondi adjusts her mic, her voice suddenly higher-pitched. "That's a mischaracterization. Coastal Consulting was a temporary legal structure during an acquisition that never materialized." Crockett lets the words hang in the air before switching to another document. "Interesting, because according to these banking records," she continues, as the screen changes, "Coastal Consulting received a $500 million government contract for infrastructure advisory services just 14 months ago." The murmur grows louder, journalists' eyes wide as camera flashes strobe across the chamber. "That contract," Bondi snaps, trying to recover, "was awarded through proper channels, and I fail to see how this relates to today's hearing on transparency." "I'm getting to that," Crockett replies, her voice steady, her confidence growing, "because what's particularly interesting, Ms. Bondi, is that Coastal Consulting has no employees, no website, and no physical office. Yet somehow it won a $500 million federal contract over established, credible firms." Bondi's face flushes crimson. "Congresswoman, you're making insinuations without context. These business arrangements are complicated." "Oh, they're complicated, all right," Crockett cuts in, sliding yet another page onto the projector. "So complicated that the funds from that contract passed through 3 different shell companies before landing in accounts directly tied to you." The chairman, who moments ago looked bored, now leans forward with genuine interest. "Congresswoman Crockett, are you saying you can prove this money trail?" Crockett lifts a thick folder high for everyone to see. "I can, Mr. Chairman. Here are the banking records showing transfers from Atlantic Infrastructure Partners to Global Strategic Solutions to Meridian Holdings, and finally, to accounts personally controlled by Ms. Bondi." The chamber erupts. Photographers scramble to capture Bondi's expression as she clutches her microphone, whispering frantically to her attorney. Reporters race to push breaking news alerts onto their platforms. This isn't speculation anymore. This is hard evidence. Live on the record. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifts. Pam Bondi, once untouchable, now sits cornered and exposed. Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman underestimated by so many, stands firm, her reputation for fearlessness cemented before the eyes of the nation. What began as another routine hearing has turned into a historic confrontation. The truth is out, and there is no going back. The woman who had entered the hearing room as a respected former attorney general now looked cornered. Pam Bondi's trademark composure was unraveling. Her voice, once crisp and commanding, faltered, as Jasmine Crockett pressed forward with undeniable force. "Additionally," Crockett said, her tone gaining strength, "I have testimony from a former employee of Ms. Bondi's firm who personally oversaw these financial transfers." Gasps swept through the chamber as Crockett gestured toward a man seated quietly in the back row. "This is Mr. Daniel Harrington," she continued. "He served as financial director at Bondi Strategies, until he was fired after raising questions about these very arrangements." All eyes shifted to Harrington. Bondi's head snapped up, her face pale. This is an ambush," she stammered. "I was not told Mr. Harrington would be present, nor was I given time to review these so-called documents." The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Bondi, while the committee respects your position, these materials were submitted last week in accordance with our rules." Bondi turned to her attorney, who grimly nodded. The realization struck her like a blow. Crockett had outmaneuvered her at every turn. Crockett pressed on. "The contract we're discussing was for critical infrastructure cybersecurity consulting. Yet, according to Mr. Harrington's testimony, neither Bondi Strategies nor the shell companies involved employ a single cybersecurity expert." The tension in the chamber reached breaking point. Bondi's lead attorney stood abruptly. "Mr. Chairman, we request a recess to review these claims." "Before that," Crockett cut in, holding up another document, "I'd like to enter one final exhibit into the record." The screen behind her lit up with an email. "This is correspondence from Ms. Bondi to Secretary Wilson, dated just 3 weeks before the contract was awarded. In it, she references their agreement about infrastructure funding, and even mentions their upcoming dinner at the Capitol Grill." Chaos erupted. The chairman's gavel struck hard. "The committee will recess for 30 minutes. Ms. Bondi, I suggest you use that time to prepare substantive responses." Bondi sat frozen as cameras zoomed in on her face, pale, stricken, afraid. For the first time in her public career, the woman who prided herself on always controlling the room realized she was being dismantled piece by piece. Outside the chamber, a swarm of reporters closed in on Crockett. "Congresswoman, how long have you been investigating Bondi?" one shouted. "This isn't about politics," Crockett replied firmly. "This is about $500 million in taxpayer money that appears to have been siphoned through elaborate shell structures to enrich a well-connected insider. The American people deserve to know where their money went." As the crowd turned, cameras caught Bondi slipping out a side door, flanked by attorneys. The contrast was cinematic. Crockett stood tall in the spotlight while Bondi fled from it, her empire beginning to crumble. When the committee reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. Extra chairs had been crammed into the chamber for staffers and lawmakers eager to witness the unfolding drama. News networks, initially sent for routine coverage, now scrambled to broadcast what was quickly becoming the political showdown of the year. Bondi re-entered with 2 additional attorneys, her legal team visibly expanded. She carried a massive binder stuffed with hastily compiled notes, but her trademark confident smile was gone. By contrast, Crockett walked in with only a slim folder and a tablet. She didn't need reams of paper. She had been preparing for this moment for months. "The committee will come back to order," the chairman announced gravely. "Congresswoman Crockett, you may proceed." Crockett approached the podium. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, earlier you claimed these business arrangements were complex. Would you agree that complexity can sometimes be used to hide improper financial relationships?" Bondi leaned toward her microphone. "Congresswoman, my legal team advises me that many of your characterizations are misleading. The transactions were legal and properly disclosed in the necessary filings." "Properly disclosed?" Crockett raised an eyebrow, tapping her tablet. The screen behind her displayed an IRS filing. "This is your company's most recent tax disclosure. Can you point out where the $500 million contract appears here?" Bondi shifted uncomfortably. "That arrangement would have been disclosed under different entities. That's standard practice for complex business structures." "Standards? Practice?" Crockett repeated slowly. "Let's test that. Is it standard practice for a former attorney general to build multiple shell companies to obscure government contracts? Is it standard practice to receive $500 million for expertise your firm doesn't even have?" Before Bondi could respond, Crockett pivoted. "Allow me to introduce our next witness." From the audience, a woman rose. "This is Patricia Winters, former procurement officer at the Department of Infrastructure. Ms. Winters, please tell the committee about the bidding process for the cybersecurity contract awarded to Coastal Consulting. There was no competitive bidding, Winters said firmly. I was instructed to process it as a sole source contract. When I asked for justification, I was told the directive came from the top and not to ask questions. Whispers rippled through the room. Bondi's attorney scribbled frantically. Ms. Winters, Crockett continued, were you aware of Bondi's connection to Coastal Consulting? No, ma'am. The paperwork listed only Coastal Consulting. Had I known of her connection, I would have flagged it as a conflict of interest, Bondi snapped, her voice rising. This is hearsay. Ms. Winters has no direct knowledge of my firm's business dealings. Actually, Crockett countered, producing another document. We have the incorporation papers for Coastal Consulting, listing your home address in Tampa as the company's legal headquarters. Care to explain why a supposedly independent firm uses your personal residence? Cameras zoomed in. Bondi's face flushed scarlet as she nearly knocked over her water glass. What we're seeing, Crockett told the committee, is not complexity. It's a deliberate scheme to hide financial gains. Ms. Bondi once prosecuted shell company fraud as Attorney General. She knows exactly how these schemes work, not just how to expose them, but how to design them. Another document appeared on the screen. An internal memo from Bondi Strategies, written by Bondi herself. It instructed staff to maintain separation between public-facing operations and the infrastructure contract. It explicitly read, no direct communication about coastal activities through company channels. Ms. Bondi, Crockett asked coolly, why would a legitimate business require such secrecy? The chamber fell silent. Bondi stared at her own words on the screen, unable to respond. Crockett advanced one step closer. Perhaps you can provide context for this other email, sent from your personal account to your financial director. The screen shifted again, revealing the damning line. The Delaware structure gives us complete anonymity. No one can connect these dots unless someone on our side talks. Make sure the team understands absolute discretion. Gasps filled the chamber. Photographers snapped furiously, capturing the moment Bondi's mask finally slipped. Her lips parted. In shock, her eyes wide. The exact image destined to dominate front pages nationwide. Crockett's voice carried the weight of finality. Ms. Bondi, you built your career on prosecuting corruption. Today, it appears you've been caught practicing it. For the first time, Bondi had no words. You've spoken often about government transparency, Crockett began, her voice sharp, with clarity. Yet these documents show you personally orchestrated a scheme to conceal your connection to a $500 million government contract. A contract for cybersecurity services your firm wasn't qualified to provide. The words struck like a hammer. Pam Bondi's attorney leaned close, whispering frantically in her ear. But Bondi sat frozen, her eyes locked on the evidence projected for all to see. Crockett pressed forward, voice steady but firm. I have one final question. This contract required specific deliverables, cybersecurity protocols, systems, safeguards. Where are they? What did the American taxpayers receive in exchange for $500 million? The room turned still. 10 seconds of silence stretched like an eternity. Finally, Bondi broke. I need to consult with my legal team before answering further questions, she stammered, her composure cracking. I thought you might, Crockett replied coolly. Then, turning to the chairman, Mr. Chairman, I formally request this committee refer the matter to the Department of Justice for criminal investigation. I also move to subpoena all financial records from Ms. Bondi and her associated entities. The chairman, visibly shaken, nodded slowly. So moved. This committee will coordinate with the appropriate authorities. At that exact moment, 2 men in dark suits rose from the back row. They displayed badges to security and moved toward the dais. FBI agents, present not as spectators, but as witnesses ready to act. Bondi's facade shattered completely. Tears welled in her eyes, her breath coming in ragged bursts. She turned toward her attorneys for rescue, but even they looked stunned and powerless. The woman who had entered the chamber as a respected figure now sat exposed, humiliated before the nation, her career and freedom in jeopardy. And standing, opposite her, calm and composed, was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, holding nothing but the strength of documented truth. In less than an hour, Crockett had transformed the narrative. What began as a routine oversight hearing had become a national spectacle, one that would redefine accountability in American politics. The firestorm ignites. As cameras zoomed in on Bondi's trembling hands, the images beamed across the country, in real time. Within minutes, hashtags like Bondigate and Chia Crockett Exposes 500M exploded across social media. Reporters swarmed Crockett as she exited the chamber. "Congresswoman, did you expect Bondi to break down like that?" one shouted. Crockett paused, adjusted her blazer, and answered firmly, "This isn't about me or Ms. Bondi's emotions. This is about $500 million in taxpayer dollars that vanished through shell companies and offshore accounts. The American people deserve answers, not excuses." Meanwhile, Bondi slipped out a side exit, escorted by security and her shaken legal team. Cameras captured her tear-streaked face as she ducked into a waiting black SUV. The once polished Attorney General, now disheveled and broken, became the defining image of the scandal. Her mascara-stained cheeks splashed across news sites. Within the hour. By evening, the story had grown beyond a congressional confrontation. It had become a national reckoning. Newsrooms and shock primetime anchors scrapped their scheduled stories. "We begin tonight with what can only be described as one of the most shocking moments in recent congressional history," declared veteran newsman Michael Reynolds. Pamela Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida, is now at the center of a $500 million scandal, exposed today by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in dramatic fashion. The Department of Justice wasted no time. At 8 p.m., an official statement announced a formal investigation into allegations of fraud, money laundering, and corruption tied to Bondi's consulting firms. Commentators scrambled to keep up. Conservative pundits initially labeled the hearing a partisan witch hunt. But as the mountain of documents and testimony surfaced, their defenses fell silent. Progressive media, meanwhile, hailed Crockett's calm yet devastating dismantling of Bondi's empire. What we saw today was not political theater, legal analyst Sophia Washington noted. It was a methodical, evidence-driven takedown. Crockett didn't rely on rhetoric. She let the facts and the documents speak for themselves. Fallout expands. The ripple effects came fast. By dawn, 3 of Bondi Strategy's largest corporate clients had severed ties, citing compliance concerns. The firm's website vanished overnight, replaced with a placeholder reading, "Under maintenance." The Department of Infrastructure ordered an emergency review of all contracts awarded during the last administration. 2 senior officials connected to the coastal consulting deal were placed on administrative leave. At 10 a.m. the next morning, Crockett addressed the press again, this time flanked by the Oversight Committee chairman and several colleagues. "Yesterday was just the beginning," she declared. "This committee has unanimously voted to expand our investigation beyond Ms. Bondi, to review every government contract awarded under similar circumstances. The $500 million we uncovered may be just the tip of the iceberg." Reporters shouted follow-ups about Bondi's whereabouts, with rumors flying that she had fled to the Cayman Islands. Crockett stood tall and unshaken. "I can't speak to her location," she said, "but I can confirm the FBI has secured her offices in Washington, Tampa, and New York. No one escapes accountability forever." Moments later, breaking news alerts buzzed through the press corps. Coastal Consulting's banking records had been subpoenaed. Transfers had been traced to Switzerland, Luxembourg, and Singapore. The scandal was no longer national. It had international dimensions. Washington reacts. Inside a secure conference room in D.C., FBI financial crimes experts and DOJ prosecutors mapped the tangled web of companies and accounts on sprawling whiteboards. It's like she took everything she learned as Attorney General and wrote a playbook for fraud, one investigator muttered. Political analysts framed the scandal in historic terms. This isn't just about one official, noted longtime Washington observer Eleanor Hayes. This is about the revolving door between government and private consulting. Crockett may have just pulled a thread that unravels decades of corruption. Meanwhile, Crockett's stature skyrocketed. Overnight, her social media following surged by 300,000. Her office was flooded with thousands of messages from citizens, thanking her for holding the powerful accountable. She had not only exposed a scandal, she had tapped into a deep hunger for truth in an age of spin. Bondi's last stand. 3 days later, Bondi broke her silence. Through her attorneys, she issued a written statement. While I dispute many of the characterizations made during the congressional hearing, I acknowledge that certain business structures associated with my consulting practice created the appearance of impropriety. It was too little, too late. The damage was already done. Her career lay in ruins, her firms in freefall, her once commanding presence now reduced to a cautionary tale of arrogance and greed. And at the center of the storm stood Jasmine Crockett, calm, unshaken, and resolute. She had proven that one determined lawmaker, armed with evidence and courage, could shake even the most fortified pillars of power. The scandal was far from over, but one truth had already been cemented. In the face of corruption, silence collapses. Evidence endures.